Hi, I'm Mark from Valor XL, and today I'd like to talk to you about communication. You know, we go around with these things practically attached to our hands. We use them constantly. It's so ironic that we're always connected to technology that helps us to communicate, and yet sometimes we don't do a very good job with communication. Now, maybe in your small business or your nonprofit, you're always looking for that one magic ingredient that will really help you move into true success. And maybe you think that technology is that ingredient. And technology is wonderful. I mean, it's certainly something that we can utilize in a variety of facets. But the thing with technology is it doesn't really help us to do anything that we're not already doing. It's just a furtherance of our efforts. It's a continuation of what we've already put into place. It's just a tool. It's not a fix-all for whatever our problems are. And if you go even deeper than technology, maybe for you it comes down to believing that money would be the answer to all of your organization's problems. But that's kind of a sinkhole as well, because money, like technology, is just a tool. You can have a lot of money in your organization and use amazing technology and yet still somehow fail. Many businesses that have seemingly everything you could ever want at their disposal end up on a downward spiral. And why in the world is that? Well, I really believe that one of the undoings of even the best organizations is poor communication. And so today I'd just like to share a couple of things with you that you can keep in mind in your own small business or nonprofit about communication. I really believe it's the single most important thing we can focus on. And there are so many different layers of communication in our organizations. It's not just a general communication. It's all the different interactions that we have internally, externally. It's very nuanced. There's so much to it, and it touches so many other different things. So I'd like to just challenge you today to maybe think about communication from a new perspective as I share a couple of things with you that will hopefully frame in your mind the importance of communicating well in your organization. Now, one of the first things that you need to look at with communication in your organization is the fact that there are so many different levels to it. And I kind of look at them across a spectrum. They kind of run from most interactive to least interactive. And most interactive, to me, obviously, would be in person. When we can have dialogue with somebody face to face, that is always the best possible platform for us to communicate whatever it is that we're trying to communicate. The important thing to remember, though, is that communication, to be effective, to actually work, has to be two-way. It isn't simply about us saying something to someone else. It's us being willing to listen to what that person has to say. And going hand in hand with that, if we say something, the other person needs to convey something back to us. They need to agree. They need to illustrate to us that they understand what it is that we're presenting. Or if they have a difference of opinion, they need to voice that. If they don't really understand, if something was a little bit unclear, they need to ask us for clarification, and we need to be able to find effective ways to present whatever it was we were talking about a little bit differently. That works best in person. We can read body language, facial expressions, all those important things, and it's so much more comfortable if you need to interject when someone else is talking. It works great in person. But the reality of the last several years is that we don't do as many in-person meetings maybe as we used to. With everything that occurred during the pandemic, so many organizations got recalibrated to the idea of video meetings, whether that's Zoom calls or meetings in Teams. Video conferencing is integrated into the fabric of how we do business. And it is an incredible tool. It certainly gives us an opportunity to connect with people we otherwise might not be able to. Now, one of the facts about video conferencing is, even though we can see each other and we can talk back and forth real time, it's not the same as talking in person. Part of the problem there is that it's kind of inherently clunky because we're relying on internet connectivity. And especially if people are in a lot of different geographic areas, you really have no idea what kind of connection and coverage somebody has, and it can be extremely frustrating. You're already beginning to lose a little bit of what you have in that personal interaction. So you have to be a little bit more disciplined in how you conduct that kind of a meeting. And the communication that you use in a video conference needs to be a little bit more purposeful because, again, you don't have some of the benefits that you do when you're standing 3 feet away from someone. Taking it to the next level on that journey from most interactive to least interactive, I think the next one would be phone calls. We still have the ability to talk to people real time, but we no longer have that facial connection. We can't look at facial expressions. We can't look at hand gestures. We can't tell as someone's talking what the intent is in something that they say. It can become much easier to, first of all, misunderstand what's being said, and secondly, to lose focus altogether and not really give the level of attention to the person speaking that we should. The next level of communication would be texting. It's still theoretically real time, but now we're not even hearing the person's voice. So it's impossible to tell what mood are they in. How are they saying this? Is it something that they're sharing with me as a suggestion? Or are they saying it in a more firm tone that implies that I'm being instructed to do this? Texts are really difficult. We also like to abbreviate in texts. And in a business setting, that can be extremely difficult to deal with. Because when you start abbreviating, you're once again introducing a little bit of ambiguity into the conversation. Effective business communication at its core has to always be clear and precise, and anything less than that is doing a disservice to the person speaking and the person listening. And then we come down to the last link in that chain. What I personally believe is the least interactive form of business communication, the email. Now, isn't that ironic? It's probably our least interactive way to communicate, and yet it's the thing we probably use the most. We're so inundated with emails now that we take them for granted. We see our inbox piling up, and we don't really put any urgency on anything unless we see a flame or an exclamation point or something else that indicates, look at me, read me, important. And as a result, we tend to overlook things, especially if there's been some sort of an email chain where there are replies going back and forth. We see that there's a conversation unfolding, and sometimes we feel that we don't really need to become part of that conversation until it directly involves us. The other drawback with an email is if you read one and don't completely understand what the person who wrote it was saying, you have to then take the time to compose an email, send it back to them, wait for them to open it and to respond. And so it gets even more cumbersome. Another drawback with emails is that many people, unfortunately, seem to only read the first paragraph of an email. And if you're communicating something that's complex enough that you need multiple paragraphs, you really need for the person reading the email to read it in its entirety. If they don't, they might come back and ask you a question that you already answered in one of those other paragraphs. Another thing that can be really irksome about emails is when people copy everyone under the sun on the email, whether or not they really need to be part of the conversation. And then as things are wrapping up, you have an endless array of thank you, you're welcome, that goes on for half an hour. So emails are probably the most critical thing for us to be precise in, because they are the ubiquitous piece of business communication, the thing that we're all inundated with and that none of us can get away from. And one of the most important things that you can do in a business email is include a call to action. If you're communicating something to someone, ask them at the end of the email, please let me know if you didn't understand. Is there any more information that you need? Please respond and let me know that you're able to take care of this. Always put ownership back on the recipient of the email. Don't presume that someone has read it and that they're moving forward with whatever you asked. Now, sometimes people balk at opening an email that asks for a read receipt, but sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you have to hold the recipient accountable for actually reading what you sent to them. If you combine that with a call to action that will require that recipient to write back to you, then if you don't get a response or you don't see a read receipt, it's completely valid to reach back out to that person, especially if it was something of a critical nature. So one of the areas of breakdown in business communication is just the talking back and forth, interacting with clients or with our colleagues as we navigate through the workday. But there's a whole other layer of complication that comes into communication in a business setting when you're talking about training. Because training, in some ways, is the most crucial communication you'll ever engage in. It's helping people to understand how to perform their job functions properly and correctly. So if there's a breakdown in that communication, you're starting everything off on the wrong foot. You're building someone's entire participation in your organization on a very shaky platform. If they don't have clarity about what they're expected to do, they'll never do it correctly. So make sure that whoever is involved in conducting training is qualified to do so. Just because someone might have the know-how about what goes into a particular job function doesn't necessarily mean that they are a good trainer. A good trainer needs to maintain that level of interaction as whatever is taking place in that classroom setting unfolds. It's important not only to be able to present something, but to ensure that everybody is understanding as things are being taught, and to understand that things have to be built incrementally. People need to grasp basic concepts of a particular job function or process before you can build on that. Never presume that people are understanding whatever it is that's being shared. Always ensure that they're asking questions if they are unclear about something, and that you're addressing any of that misunderstanding before you proceed to the next section. One thing you never want to hear in your organization is for someone to say, "Well, I thought you knew that." Again, we can never presume that everybody is in the know. We need to take concrete steps to ensure that they are. Another form of really crucial communication involves our documentation. And if you watch the Valor Excel channel on a regular basis, you know that I'm a big proponent of documenting every single thing that you do in your organization. It's the most powerful step that you can ever take toward real success because it removes any ambiguity about how things get done. You're ensuring that there is a collective knowledge base that everybody has access to. Unfortunately, what can happen sometimes is that people can lose focus on what is really current and relevant when it comes to the documentation of our processes. So what exactly is the shelf life on a policy or a process or a procedure? Well, it depends, but you need to keep an eye on it. And you need to have more than one person keeping an eye on it. You may develop a really good document that explains in detail how to perform a particular process, but within 6 weeks, it's already rendered obsolete because the people who actually perform that function have learned that there are a few extra steps that need to get integrated in. If somebody isn't keeping tabs on that and making sure that there's a current revision of that existing document, then what you have, your official one voice of truth, is meaningless. Another thing that can happen if you don't really keep tabs on it is you can have multiple people working from different iterations of the same document, all assuming they have the latest and greatest. That's catastrophic when it comes to reference materials because someone will swear, "Well, look, it says so right here," not realizing that there are 2 newer versions. Ideally, in our organizations, it would be great to have a communications officer, but let's face it, we're usually all wearing 5 or 6 different hats. There are never enough people to go around, so the chances of having a specialized position like that aren't the greatest. But what you can do is have a couple of people who really have an attention for detail to look over things, and on a regular basis, with some sort of structure that you can actually follow and hold accountability for, take a look at the processes that you use and determine when things are already starting to get a little bit out of date. I hope what I shared with you today was food for thought, and if it was, please give this episode a like, and in the comments below, let me know what's the single biggest thing that you struggle with in your organization when it comes to communication. Is it emails? Is it too many emails? Is it outdated instructions? I'd be really interested to know because I'd like to take some of those things and explore them a lot more deeply in future installments. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to Valor Excel. We publish new content on a regular basis that's specifically tailored to the needs of small businesses and nonprofits. Because let's face it, the things that we deal with in our organizations when we have few people and sometimes few resources are in a completely different world than a massive corporation would face. So we're here to bring insight and instruction that will hopefully help you to move in a better direction. But how do you know what direction you're moving in now? Are you even on a healthy trajectory for your organization to thrive? You can click on the link in the description below this video to download a free PDF taking your organization's temperature. It'll give you tremendous insight into how you're doing things and let you know whether or not there might be some areas where you could make course correction. I really appreciate you joining me today. I invite you to come back for the next installment. Remember, at Valor Excel, we're committed to helping you do smart work. Thanks again. I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.